Get started. Bonjour, good morning. Good to have you in our class. So I've shared the link of the notebook in the chat also. So if you can take it from here, or else you can always go to the website and then like go to schedule, and then the link would be here. So either way, you can take the notebooks. So today, so once you open the notebook, always select file and then like save a copy in Drive, and then work on the copy drive because you won't have write permission on the real notebook. So once you took a copy, you can work on it and then like save and then play around it. So in today's class, we will be seeing about sklearn, that is scikit-learn. This is an very essential library for you to implement ML algorithms and then like do pre-processing and then like do dimensionality reduction and then like clustering. There are a lot of things that you can do with scikit-learn. And this class also would be very much essential for you when you're working in the Kaggle project, where you have to do grid search and then like do cross validation. And then so whenever you want to do something inbuilt functions, so you can always use that to implement these things. So in our assignment 1 and 2, we have seen linear regression and then like KNN, all those things. So here we will be seeing how to implement using scikit-learn, and we will also see why we are essentially doing those things. So in the first thing, like we would be importing all the essential okay, so first thing is like we'll be importing all the important import functions, and once that is imported, we will be loading the data set. So here the data frame would be like, you can, if you want to know like whether what type of data type it is, so you can always type it as type of and then like data adds, and then like you can see that's a data frame. And then like you can see, like, to get more idea, you can, oh, sorry about that. I thought I was sharing my screen. Can you see my screen now? Okay, like previously, were you able to see my screen, or like just now you can see my screen? Okay, sounds good. So when you type like data frame dot shape, so here we have like 400 rows and then like 5 columns. So you can just print head or tail to see the top. For head, you will get the top. If you mention as 10 here, and then like you will get the top 10 records. Or if you mention tail, so it will be showing the bottom 10 records. So similarly, you can just play around it to see like, okay, what kind of data we have. So here in this problem statement, we have an user ID, and then like whether what the gender is, like male, female, and then what their age is. And then we have an estimated salary, like, and then like we have like whether the person has purchased or not. So you can just, this is a dummy data, but you can correlate in a business point of view. Like let's take you are opening a bank account, and then like the bank has this kind of access, like you're using a credit card, and then like they know your approximate salary, and then like how you're purchasing, and then like whether what kind of spender you are, all those stuff. So now now we are gonna have a new car launched, or like a new restaurant launched, and then like the owner want to see like how many people will come, and then in what range of people might attend, might come to the restaurant or something. So you can just correlate this kind of examples that might help you in real time, like when you face this kind of problem. So this is just a dummy problem. So in this problem statement, we will be taking two important columns. So one is the estimated salary, and then whether they have purchased or not. So if you just print X and C, I have to run it. Yeah, so we will be taking age and then So if you just don't want to print everything, you can just print top 5 records and then see like, okay, so whatever we have just taken that as a array. So you can see like when you compare with the data frame, the age is 35 and then like 20K is the salary, and then like, so similarly we just have converted everything to NumPy, like a NumPy array. So here why we are doing is like we can use the gender also, but obviously we can't use the ID column. Any clue like why we are not, why we will not use user ID in the model prediction? You can either unmute or like chat, like, since it's like we can have an interactive session, like so it will also helps you to brainstorm your Kaggle part, like with the project that you're gonna come see, like intuitively what you can understand and do. So any idea like why we should not generally use user ID or like any ID columns in the chat, in the prediction of a model? Yeah, so ID is like unique for everyone. So it doesn't mean like, okay, if I have this user ID, I will be purchasing this, or like if I have this user ID, I won't purchase this. So it's like like in a database, ID is very much essential. But generally in machine learning models, while you're building it, it's good to drop it in terms of like IDs or stuff before using it, because that might also mislead, or like you might not get a desirable performance because it might be confusing for the model, like why it there is no like dependency between the user ID and the purchased, whether the customer has purchased or not. So you can kind of drop it. So we can, the ideal way would be like take gender, age, and estimated salary, and then predict whether the customer has purchased a product or not. So however, in this problem, we will be taking only 2 columns just to make sure like we can do some visualizations and see, because as it gets the dimension gets increased, it would be really hard to visualize. So for that purpose, we are kind of like slightly not using the age column. So so just to see, like in X we have, so we sorry, we don't take the gender column. So we in X we have age and then the salary, and then similarly we in Y we would be having, run it. So in Y we would be having like whether the customer has purchased or not. So 0 it means the customer haven't purchased, and 1 is the customer has purchased. And this is the data shape, and this is one of the important cross-validation strategy that we will be seeing. Like in the assignments, you will be seeing like, okay, take the first 80% and then the last 20%, last 20% of the records would be for validation. Those kind of thing we will always do. So, but here we can do that using an inbuilt function called the train test split. Let's take your X. So we have 400 records. Now we have to split it between train and validation, because without that, we don't know how the model is getting generalized well, or it's overfitting or underfitting. So to do those stuff, like we have to split the data set, for which we can use train test split, which is an scikit-learn's inbuilt function that you can always use. And here, the train test split size. So here you can just give this as a percentage. Like here we have mentioned as 25% is used for training, sorry, 75% is used for training, and then like 25% will be used for testing. And then like this random state we will be mentioning here, just to be sure like it's always consistent. And there is another interesting called shuffle equal to true. So what it does is like, let's take you have 400 records, it's shuffle everything, and then like take 75% for training, and then like another 25% for testing. So you can see like why shuffle sometimes is helpful, because the model that generally we are mostly will be building is like based upon IID, that is identical and independent of each other. So even if you shuffle, you should not see any correlation. So it's like sometimes it's good to shuffle so that the model see different records and then different scenarios and then able to generate as well. So we can add shuffle. So if you just mention this as 0.2, then 20% would be taken for testing and then 80% remaining will be kept for training. So now if we see the shape of it, so you can see like 320 records is being taken for training and then like X test. So remaining 80 is kept for validation or like testing. Like generally it should be validation, like the test data, we should use it finally. So now we will be using 320 records for training the model and then like 80 to see like how it's getting performed. So I have a question is that, will it be fine if we use random state and shuffle together? Yeah, generally you should use some random state because the shuffling and splitting happens randomly. So it will be hard for you to reproduce your results. So we should always have some random states or seeds that's been initialized in the project so that how many times you run, you should get the same result. Let's take, you might take a good 80% and then very bad 20% for testing, and then like that might have a bad performance in your test data. So sometimes the split also matters in getting a good performance. So generally it should not be the case. So while you're working in a project or something, if you know like always if you run you are getting a consistent result, then it's kind of good. However, we will be seeing another strategy how to avoid, let's take if you're going to, like, we don't know like what is zero is, like when we keep random state as 0 or 100, it might take a different split. So it's totally depends, just to be sure like we are getting a consistent result. So in the later part of the session, we will also be seeing like what other strategy we can use when we take a bad split or something. So we will be generally using some k-fold approaches to overcome those things. So here, I think you might, this standard scalar is a new concept that you will be seeing, I think. So just we are having a separate topic on standard scalar. So currently, like what standard scalar does is like, so if you see what is 0, 5, so you see like the age is in the form of 58, 26, and then like the other column has like 80K, 50K, something. But once we pass it to the standard scalar, so you can see like the number is squashed between some 0 to 1 or like squashed to a very nominal number. We will be seeing more like why we'll be doing that and then why it is helpful and then why it serves the purpose. But for the time being, we will be using the standard scalar and then like try to squash the numbers between a very small and then nominal range. And then like this function is for like visualizing the models, how the boundary surface is, how the model, a linear decision or like non-linear or like irregular shape. So those kind of thing. So the first thing is like we'll be seeing into logistic regression. So you might have seen this in the class, like logistic regression. Obviously, it's a bad naming convention. Like though it might feel like a regression problem, but surprisingly, it's a classification problem. So it will be like very similar to linear regression, but we will be using a sigmoid function to squash between 0 and 1 and take the probability and then like maximum likelihood. So we might have seen this concepts in technically and the class. So here you'll be seeing like how to implement in scikit-learn. So once you can just using scikit-learn, you can always call this function and then store it in a variable and then like use logistic regression dot fit of and then pass x train and y train. So that we got here, and then like that is y prediction logistic regression dot predict of pass the test data set. So that is here x test is like 80 records and then like here it's like 320 records. So we will be testing with the 80 records, and then like we got wipe red. So just to see like print of wipe red. So let's take first 10 records and then like print of wipe test classifier. Okay, so you can see like almost for the first nine predictions, it's almost good, and then like there is a misclassification, and then so this is just to see like how the results are. However, we will be building an accuracy score and then the confusion matrix. So in the last class, we would be seeing, we have seen in the live in the lectures of Sarath, like we have seen like the evaluation metrics for classification problems. So there are a lot of scores that you can always use, like F1 score, precision, recall, accuracy, confusion matrix. So these are like evaluation metrics that you can use to get a good perspective, like how the model performs. So here we are getting 88.75% as an accuracy. So it's a binary classification problem with zeros and ones, whether the customers are purchased a product or like not purchased. And then like here, like it has predicted correctly, and then like here it has predicted whether the customer will purchase. And these are like type 1 and type 2 errors. So here, if you now you will have a question like why everything we have implemented manually in the assignments. The main purpose is if you just yeah. So there are like penalties L1 and L2, and then like there is like C values, and then like there are random values. So as a machine learning developer, or like when you work on a machine learning problem, so when you see like, okay, this is a penalty L2, that means like you should have an understanding like, okay, this is an L2 regularization that we will be penalizing the model, and then L1 is a kind of regularization. And then so we should have an intuition like what it exactly does on the model. So rather than as a black box, we just have to play around the values. Sometimes it's good to know like each and every kind of purpose, what it does to the model and how it increases or decreases the performance. So this comes very much essential when you work in a real-time problem. And then, yeah, here we will be visualizing the model. Any idea like why we got a linear line to separable between the class 0 and 1? Any answer in the chat? Like, why do you think we got a decision boundary like this? Come on, it's an easy question. Like, so the fundamental, yeah, the fundamental assumption of logistic regression is a linear model. So however, whatever hyperparameters you use, it will always try to separate in a linear boundary way. You can see like there are a lot of misclassifications here. And if you see, this is the test. And you can hardly count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the red. Yeah, this is the 6, and then like you can see like green is like 1, 2, 3. So this is here. So this is a way to visualize. However, in a real problem that you generally work on would be like multi-dimensional, or like dimensionally it will be very big. So you can't practically plot it and see like how the surface is, or can we do anything better. So that's where like we built kind of some confusion matrix, or like F1 score, precision, and recall to see how the performance really is. So just for the tutorial purpose, we took a two-dimensional like a 2-column problem, and then like try to plot it and then like see the boundary. And the next problem that we are going to see is k nearest neighbor. So till now, you guys have any doubt, or like anything that's not clear, you need any explanation, or like why we are using that? So if there is any doubt, like you can always hand raise, or like you can put that in the chat. Okay, sounds good. It seems like you guys can follow it. So here next is like k nearest neighbor. I think you have seen that in the assignment also. Like we can always mention the number of neighbors here and the value of p, and then like the what kind of metric we use as a distance. So when you always have like, okay, like what kind of hyperparameter you use, you can always use shift plus tab, and then you can see a node reference material that is appearing here, and then you can see a small example that they have given, and then what each and every means. Like by default it is 2. Even if you mention this as a 2 or not, it doesn't matter, like because by default value is 2. And then we will be calling the KNN classifier, and then like you will be set as like 3 neighbors or like 5 neighbors or like 7, 11. You can easily implement this kind of model using scikit-learn, and then like you can try with different k values and then get an optimal k value that generalized well. And then like similarly we would be fitting with a training data, and then like we'll be predicting on X test, and it will be stored on Y pred, that is prediction. And then based upon that we will be building the classification report, or like see how the confusion matrix is, how it performs on the test data. So you can see like the accuracy of KNN is 93.75, whereas the logistic regression is 88.75. So what do you infer from these two things? So intuitively, it seems like KNN is better, but whenever we see this kind of numbers, we should always think from a different point of view, like why the reason is happening. So it might be possibly like the KNN's decision boundary is irregular and non-linear decision boundary. So it seems like it can able to better capture the data more than the linearly separable problem. So you can see the decision boundary of KNN in the training data, and then like you see like it's like kind of irregular, and then it tries to overfit very well. And just to be sure, like if I select 1 as a nearest neighbor, so even you can see here like why it's taking much time, because the KNN generally takes very long time to run. So when you use k equal to 1, do you think the model is underfitting or overfitting? Yeah, obviously overfitting. You can see how the decision boundaries changes here. Even there are like only 2 red points here, or like 1 red point. So you can just see like a decision boundary is forming here, and then like it's so randomly, like not randomly, but even if there is 1 point, it is considering that as a point. Where like once we make it as like 5 or 7, so let's make it as 7 and then see how the decision boundary is. Yeah, so almost 5 and 7 are almost kind of equal, but when we use 1, it's too overfitting, and then like if we use like 50 or 30 as a nearest neighbor, then it might underfit. So you can I think even in the assignment there was some graph like how you increase the k value and then what's the performance on the validation on the test. So this is implementation using scikit-learn for those things. So this is so now we are trying to plot it for the test data set. So the next model that we will be seeing is Gaussian naive Bayes, and similarly, like you feel like it's so easy to implement within one line, like just call the function and then like fit it with X train and Y train, and then get the predictions. So now, if you have any doubt, like what we need to give in the parenthesis, or like you can just keep the cursor on top of it. You can see like we can use priors, like priors can be true or false. And then the variance smoothing can be like a very small value. So even those are like hyper parameters that you can try to tweak the model to get a better performance. So you'll be using Gaussian Naive and then like we get some results, and let's see the models visualization. And you can see like in naive Bayes, it's kind of a non-linear decision boundary, but a very smooth decision boundary, where you can see like in KNN, you can see like there are so many ups and downs and small curves that is being captured. However, in naive Bayes, you can see like there is a smooth curve. So in one way, it will be helpful, like because compared with KNN, it can able to generalize the model well. So even the objective is like not to get a very good performance in the training data, and then like in the test or validation, it performs very poorly. So we want a model that generalize both on the validation and test with comparatively with the training also. So you can see like this visualizations in the testing data, and then it almost captured the trend in a very good way, like where, so just to give you a small intuition, we have standardized the values between like -2, like between a small integer number, so that it will be very essential to calculation. You can see like if the age is like 0, and then like if the estimated value is 0, then the customer will fall under in this range. If the age is even lesser, and then they are not purchasing in that. So it's like the numbers is not that meaningful, but because we are doing a standardized scaler, so you can see like if it falls under less age, and then like if the estimated range is less, salary, if the salary is kind of less, so that then the customer is not purchasing that much. And then if the age is more, and then they have a high purchasing power, that is the high salary, then they tend to purchase more. So this intuitively that we derive from the model here. And then you just print all the accuracy, and then here we are just using the accuracy, but when you work, you can always use FN score or precision or like recall based upon your problem statement. So that's again like up to you and then problem statement that you're working on. It's not a gentle thumb rule, like you should always use the accuracy metric. Here you can see like, okay, I have implemented logistic regression, K nearest neighbor and naive Bayes. And then like, okay, it seems like naive Bayes and K nearest neighbor is good. For my problem, I got a very good performance on the validation set. And then like, if I'm getting a clash between this, if let's take, if you are getting a clash, like, okay, like K nearest neighbor and naive Bayes, if you are the developer, like what model would have been chosen, whether KNN or naive Bayes? Let's see some answers from the chat. Like it can be right or wrong, like just ping, like you don't need to unmute, or like you don't need to speak or something. Like if you don't wish to, like you can just type it as if you this is a scenario, do you prefer KNN or NB? So okay, Atul is saying naive Bayes. Any answers from like what kind of model do you prefer, like if you have this kind of like almost similar performance? Okay, sometimes it's good to go with naive Bayes rather than KNN, because initially we just working with 400 records, and then like it might perform well, and then like KNN nearest neighbor is good. But let's take, if you're going to work with 4 million data set, let's take for the whole Quebec region, and then like you have to do a customer categorization, and then like see how the performance is. As the customer number of customers or like number of people's going to scale up, then the runtime of the performances would be really bad. Even while we are plotting the graph, you might have seen like to plot and then like to work on KNN, it took a longer time to run compared to naive Bayes. It's because obviously like it compares with each and every one versus every training record. It takes really long time. So this is just a small summary table. Like if you are very new to machine learning and then like you don't, you need any guidance, like what model to choose and what instance, you can always go around this table. So here they have mentioned as like, okay, linear regression, it's like a small probabilistic and statistical we will be using, and that's a good pro. And then like in the cons, the assumption that is it's linear, and then KNN is like simple to understand. I don't know why they are written as fast and efficient, but choosing the right K value and then like it is really slow. And then in naive Bayes, it's not based upon the outliers. So even if you have 1 or 2 outliers, that's still fine. It can do well. However, it is based upon like in Gaussian naive Bayes, the assumption is like the incoming distribution would also be Gaussian. Let's take if it is some other distribution like binomial, Bernoulli, Poisson, like it might not perform well. So we should like these are like some basic assumption for each and every algorithm. So you can just think it as like, let's take if you want to cut onions, you should use the knife rather than a hammer. And similarly, if you want to nail on the floor on the wall, you should always use a hammer rather than a knife. So it doesn't mean like the knives are bad. It doesn't mean the hammers are bad. It means like for the right approach, for the right problem statement, for the right thing, you should use the right tool to solve it. That's the basic intuition that you should have. So there is no like, okay, always KNN is the worst, always naive Bayes is the best, or like always logistic regression is worst. So it's not, each and every algorithm has its own advantage and disadvantage. And based upon the problem statement, you should figure out like, okay, whether this can be solved within a single line or like that is a logistic regression. If it is a non-separable boundary, you should always go away from logistic regression, because the fundamental assumption of logistic regression is like you should have a linearly separable boundary so that it performs good. So next, till now we have whatever we have seen is like a classification problem. The next part we are going to see is a regression problem, and we will be importing the data. And then okay, this is also an interesting problem. Like let's take you are a junior consultant and level 2, what it will be your salary, and then like if you are a manager, what will be your salary? If you are a country head, or like if you are a global head, what will be your salary? So the basic assumption is like as your experience or as your title grows, your salary also is grows. So here we would be taking X and Y, and then in X, let's see what we have. So in X, we have the levels, and then in Y, we have the salaries. So now we will be like, it's a very simple toy problem that we are going to see, just to see like how the visualization works, how it really performs, to get a better intuition. So this function is for plotting, and then this is for scatter plot. This is a line that we are going to draw using a regressor. So we will be calling linear regression using scikit-learn, and always you can see like normalize equal to true or false, and then like fit intercept, and then there is always some documentation that's been written. So you don't need to mug up, or like you don't need to like know by heart by each and every value is, but you should have a firm understanding like what it means, and then like whether to use it or not. So we will be using a linear regression, and then like we will be trying to fit it. Obviously, like you can see like a line can't fit in this problem. So do you guys have any other better solution like to make this problem to better capture the trend other than linear regression? I think like in the first 2 lectures or 3 lectures, we have seen an approach that can be helpful if we can't capture the trend using a linear regression model. I think even in your assignment 1, you have that thing. Any idea like, can we do better than this? Yeah, so we will be using another regression model that is called a polynomial regression. And we can always mention the degrees that you'll be using here. So it's as simple as like mention 2, 3, 5, and then see how the performance is. And then like we will be using a fit transform and then like call the regression and then like plot it. So let's see how it's getting captured in the trend. And then you can see like it's getting tried to capture the trend when we use 2. And then like let's just make it as 3. So 3 is kind of a better fit. Let's take if a new person comes with almost like 9.5 years of experience, or like almost intermediate between 9 and 10 level, and you want to estimate the salary, what would be the right salary for that person. So you can always say like, okay, this person's salary can be around here, like 80-85K salary would be a reasonable based upon the company's salary disbursement to their employees. Yeah, so here like just small summary table, like why each and every model has its own advantage and disadvantage. And then like, okay, the linear assumption, you can see like, even let's take if the data doesn't follow a linearly distributed, like it can be captured through a linear trend, then the linear regression doesn't work that well. And then like in polynomial regression, like again, like it can be worked on any data set, and then like it kind of capture the non-linear trend in the data set. However, choosing the right degree of polynomial would always be challenging, and then like you have to try with this thing. So these are like two things. So there are some other models that I think on the Monday you will be seeing support vector machines, and then why it's essential. So you can always revisit, and then like you can take this as a reference for your, while you work in Kaggle project, this might be also helpful. Okay, now we have a small interesting problem, like why we are using standard scalar or like min-max scalar. So initially we have seen it on the top, like why we squash the numbers. So let's see like why we are doing that. So here we have a simple array, like let's take if you have 2 bedrooms, then the number of square feet is 1200, and 3 is like 1800, and then one bedroom it's 600 square feet, and then 5 bedroom it's 2400 square feet. So this is just a small toy problem that we will be using to understand even better like what's happening here. So you can see the first column, the number of bedrooms is in the scale of between 0 to 10, and here it is in a scale of 1000 to like 3000 or 4000. So the scale itself is completely different. So in one column, the scale is in the tens, that is 0 to tens. And then in the other column, we have the scale between like 1000 to like 5000 or something square feet, or like. So the scale itself is so different, then it will be really hard for the model to it takes a lot of time to converge faster, because the scale is so different, then it will be so hard mathematically. Like if you don't use standard scalar, then there might be a chance like the parameters like w's might overshoot or like explode. So generally that's where like we will be having two strategies to handle this kind of scenarios. So let's take you have a table, and then like you have to use a machine learning model to use it, and then you should be very carefully doing this kind of standard scalar or normalization, just to make sure like all the data set is in a common range, so that the model converges even faster. And then like so you can see like difference in scale across the input variables may increase the difficulty of the problem being solved. So one of the approach that you can always use is like min-max scalar. So what it does essentially is like y equal to, that is the value equal to like x minus min divided by max minus min. So let's take a small example here, and then like you want to standardize, you want to min-max scalar or like normalize this value, and here it's 1800. And the minimum value in the column is 600. So 1800 minus 600 divided by, and then here the formula is max minus min. So here the max is 2400 and then min is 600. And if you solve it, you get a value as 0.6667. So now we have almost passed in a very nominal range. And then that is how the value you got like 0.667. So similarly, now you can see like here the number of bedrooms has been changed as 0.0255. It might not be that meaningful as a human being. Like if I see like the number of bedrooms as 0.25 or like the square feet as 0.667, but in terms of machine sees everything is in the numbers. If it is in the same range, rather than like your salary is like 100K and then like the number of experience is like 2-3 years of experience, because they are like very different scales for the model to converge faster. So in this kind of scenario, you can use a normalization or a standardization technique to make it in the same scale for the input variables. So this is how the min-max scaler works. And this is also an essential component in your Kaggle project that you will be facing, like how to normalize your data. So you should think about it while you're solving it. It saves a lot of time, and I don't want to reveal the suspense once you get the data set. So here another approach that you can always do is like x minus mean, like take the mean of the column and then the standard deviation of the column and divide it, and then you will get the value. So you can see like it is kind of made it into a same scale of range. So what standard scaler does is like, you can see like if you just take this value and this value, it's like plus minus, it get cancelled. And then you take this value and this value, it's like plus minus, it's almost getting cancelled. So you can essentially see like in this column, the mean is 0, and then the standard deviation is goes like plus and minus. So we are essentially squashing the values between a nominal range and then using it. So now you have we generally have $1 million question that we don't have an answer for. Now, use min-max scaler or like scaler to normalize my data. So generally the thumb rule is, if you find if you find a column follows a normal distribution, then you can do a standardization technique. If not, you can always use min-max scaler. So that is one essential thing that you should remember while you're working in a problem. And the second one is like, how would you know like whether this column needs a standard scale, by whether this column needs to adjust the scale. So let's take, if the scale is almost near to 0 to 1, then you can you don't need to do a standard scaler because it's already in a good scale. Let's take if the values are in the tens, hundreds, or if the value is like 10 power minus 2 or minus 3 or minus 5. So then in those kind of cases, if you have an input variable in this range, then you should always try to bring between 0 to 1 for better convergence and then better learnability of the model. So this is an essential component that you need to use mostly in most of the machine learning problem, and then like have this intuition while you're solving it. So this helps you to squeeze out a little bit extra performance. And if you are like kind of confused like what to use, I would say like use these two things because it's just a small line difference. So once you build the whole model, use min-max scaler and then like standard scaler, and then see how the performance is, and whichever you get the better performance, you can keep it. But intuitively, this is the key idea that you can use. And if you want to confirm whether you want to do a standard scale, like you want to normalize the data and squash between some values, you can always use this second strategy. Like if it is in the range of tens, hundreds, thousands, and if it is like goes into 10 power e minus or 3, 4, 5, then you should try to bring it between 0 to 1. After this, you can either use min-max or standard scaler. So till now, to quickly summarize, we have seen a classification problem. We have seen some regression problems where we have seen linear regression and polynomial regression, how it's like linearly capturing and then nonlinear. And then like another important technique that we have seen here is standard scaler, min-max scaler, and then like how we are squashing the values so that the input values are on the same scale. Okay, next important thing, again, like this is also a very important concept for your all machine learning projects or like Kaggle projects. So here it's called like cross validation strategies. So previously we have seen one cross validation strategies. So that is train test split. That is 80% for training and 20 like 70-30, so you can play around it. So that is also one kind of cross-validation strategies. So here we will be using a k-fold approach. That is also very much an essential technique that you can generally use to make sure like how the performance is. So here let's kind of work in a toy data set and see how the splits are. So here you have 3 A's and then like 2 B's and then like 6 C's. So this is kind of an imbalanced data set. Like this is just a toy problem, like just to visually see what's happening in the background. But generally, when you have this kind of like imbalanced thing, even here like you can mention like, one second. Okay, so while we are splitting the data, there is another called STRA. So I think it's not coming here. So there is another call like stratify. So let's see one second. Let's see how it works. Okay, here while we are splitting randomly, what happens is like in this scenario, you just see the example here. All the train examples are like C, like all 5 C's, and then like in the test you have all A's and B's and C's. So here, what do you see the problem is? When we just split it randomly or like any strategies. In the training, we are just training with the output of C's. That is, you can just take this as an example, like, okay, let's take, you want to predict between dog, cat, and lion. And then you are always training with lions. And then like in the test examples, you have cat and dog. So most probably your predictions would be like wrong because you have never seen dogs and cats in the training set. So this would be essentially a problem like how we are going to split it. And here you can see like in the training example, by randomly you got A, B, and C, but in the test you have only the C examples. Even this is not a better representative of the test set. So here the test set is so biased or bad, and here you have seen only one example, and then like all 5-6 examples are like fully like, let's take C is lion, like you are just taken one lion and then like all the test set are lion. So it is not better representative, or like the data split might be going wrong here, or like if you have a very large data set, then it's fine. But when you have imbalanced data set or like very skewed data set, then there is another concept called stratified k-fold. So here you can see we kind of split it so that every class is given equal preference, and then you see here like we have 1A, 1B, and 3 C's. Similarly, it's kind of like both in the training, both in the test, you are seeing enough number of training examples where you see lion, dog, and cat. And similarly, the test set also has lion, dog, and cat. So in both the examples, you can see like it is kind of a good representative for both the training and testing part. So this is also an important strategy in your Kaggle project that you can use it to improve your performance even better. Okay. I will repeat it again. So here, let's take A, B, and C as like dog, A as dog, and then like B as cat, and C as lion. And when we are just trying to split it randomly, what happens is like sometimes in the training data you see just the lion, but in the tested data you are seeing dogs and cats. So your model will not have any previous experience on seeing dogs and cats. So obviously the performance would be bad. So in this example, you see like A, B, and C is there, but your test data is fully lion. So you are trained with dog, cat, and lion, but your your test data is completely comprised of Lion, and it's not a better representative of your test data because it should be mixed. Then only you will know like on what data set it performs good or bad. In stratified K4, what happens is like, let's take in the class 1, you have very less number of like the gray part is like very less, and then like this orange or yellow part is like somewhat good, and then in the brown part you have a lot of classes. So these are the 3 classes. So rather than taking a random split, so from this class, let's take you have 10 classes in class 1, you just take like 3 examples from here, and it's like you just consider 3 buckets. You just pick some number of from each and every bucket so that you are giving preference to all. So you can see like this, if you see the split here, the training example, you have A, B, and C. And similarly, even in the test set, you have like A, B, C, like similarly dog, cat, or lion. Like, so it's better representative both in training and then like testing. So this would be very much essential when you have an imbalanced data set. So you can see the distribution here. Let's take if the distribution of your class is always 33, 33, 33, that constitute to 100%. And then you don't need to worry about this that much. Let's take you have 10% of one class, and then like 40% of another class, and 50% of one more class. So mostly in real problems, you kind of face this kind of issues. Let's take you're working on a problem where you want to try to predict what animals you see in the pathways. Most probably you will see dog and then cat. People take it for a walk, and less probably you will see a raccoon, or like less probably you will see some other animals. So it will be like very less chances, but still you have to predict those things. So in those kind of scenarios, these strategies would be very much essential for you to do it. So like more than the coding part, I majorly want you to understand what to use in each and every instance or each and every problem, like what kind of strategies you can use it to approach it. So like the key emphasis is like this tutorial would be very much essential for your Kaggle project. Like if you can understand this, whatever the intuition that I'm trying to say, so if you can replicate and then like get that idea and then replicate in your Kaggle project, that you can get a very good score on that too. And like initially, like since from the class 1, every student, most of the students has a question like, okay, like how come I know like what is the right C value, or like what is the right polynomial value, what is the right K value? Like we always have that question. So let's see like how we'll be solving that in the real problem. So here we'll be loading a digits data set. That is here we have the classification output as between 0 to 9. That is handwritten digits. So here it's the 9, and then like we have like a pixel range, and then like we have to try to predict it. So here we will be using a train test split, where like we will be taking 50% for training, and like you can play around it, and then like random state, try to keep some fixed numbers. So and then like we will be splitting as train test split here. And like this is a support vector classification problem. Like we haven't seen that in the class. Like in the Mondays class, you will be seeing it. So I thought like, okay, this would be very much essential for you to even understand the class better. So just to quickly give you a small example, like the last class, Sarath has left you with an intuition, like in one side, you have read like one class, like some dogs or cats, and then like in one side you have green. So this also separates the line better, and then like this also separates the line better, and then like this also gives you a 100 performance, like very good classification. But intuitively, when you think about it, if we would draw a line here, the basic reason is like from here you got a very good range, from here you got a very good range. However, if I kind of draw a line like here, we take a different color. Like if I try to draw a line here, if you see the bound, like if you see like the margin is very less, here the margin is very high. So this is kind of like increasing the like it is almost similar to a linear classification. However, it tries to increase the margin so that it provides a better generalizability. And so like if you have like what kind of parameters here, like in the hyperparameters, you can see there is a C value, there is RBF, which is a non-decision boundary, and then you have degrees. So similarly, you can play around it. Like let's take if you have an KNN problem, rather than putting 5 and then running the whole problem again, rather than putting 7 and then running the whole problem again, and then rather putting 9 and then running the whole problem again. So what you can do is like you can provide those things as a list of values like 5, 7, 9, 11, 20, and then run it all. And then it gives you what is the best fit that we can use. So like even if you like kind of no idea about what is SPC, or like you will be seeing those in the class, but what I'm trying to say is like you can see here like we have mentioned some list of values. It is essentially what it's doing is like it in the back end, it's like kind of for loop. So first it will take RBF and then try with this value and then like try to run with C value. And then in the second run, it will take RBF and then like try to run with e power minus 3, and then like it tries to run with C equal to 10. Similarly, C equal to 100 and C equal to 1000. The next runs, it will take RBF and then like take the second values in the list, and it will goes to 1, and it runs in all like all combinations ways that we have mentioned in the list. So it is a kind of a time consuming process, because if your data set is really big, then like trying to run each and every permutation combination would be really hard. And then like we have mentioned a stratified k-fold so that the splits would be good. We have seen in the previous session, and then like the number of splits would be 10. Here like we are using 10 k-folds, and we are going to estimate which is performing good. Why we are using 10 here is like to get a statistical inference. Okay, like to get an average performance, what is the maximum standard deviation in each and every run, to get a better overall representative of the data, rather than just going one split where it can be like that split can be a very good split or a very bad split. So we can't essentially determine the model performs good or bad. So generally we use a k equal to 7, 5 or 10, or like to see a better estimate of the problem. So it's running. See, it's kind of taking some time to run because it has to run all kind of combinations. And you can see like, okay, these are the better estimates for the for this problem, where if you run with C equal to 10 and then gamma equal to 0.001, and then like RBF kernel is the better. And you can always print and see like what each and every parameters have ran. And as I said, like you see like all kind of combinations it has been run like, and you got 10 runs with that mean value, and then like this plus or minus is the standard deviation. So obviously you can see here 83, 983, and then this performs good. So however, we are trying to keep this value because it has lesser capacity, and then like it we have chosen this value, and then like when we try to fit it with the model, and then you can see like almost we are getting a very good score. And you can use this kind of commands to see like get a classification report where it intuitively say you precision, recall, FN score, and then supports. And then like you can get an overall accuracy of it also, you know, to get a better estimate. So if your classification output is 0, and it also provides you a drill down between each and every class. Let's take you have dog, cat, and lion. You can see the report of each and every class wise also. So similarly, we have 9 digits as an like 10 outputs, that is 0 to 9 digits, and you can see like how well it is performing for each and every class. When there is unbalanced data sets, you can use this kind of strategies to use how it's kind of performing. So whether it's good or bad. So this is also generally as a machine learning engineer, or like whenever you work in a machine learning problem, hyperparameter search takes a good amount of time. And since here the data set is very small, and then like very less number of data set with less number of pixels, we can just put for like large number of lists and then try to converge to a better point. And but as the number of data set size increases, or like if the dimension of the data grows, for each and every run it takes a longer time. And when you work on millions of data set, or like when you work on a real-time problem, so you can't spend most of the time in hyperparameter tuning. So one simple strategies that you can use is like, like C equal to 10 performs good. So now what we can do is like, we have estimated C value like 1, 10s, 100s, and 1000. So now like a good range is between around 10. So you can give a range like 5, 7, 10, and then like 15, 20, 25, and then like give a run. So it even converges to a better number. Like, okay, it might converge to like 17 is a better C value. So when compared with between 0 to 10, 10 to 100. So like this kind of strategies, you can always do a better hyper tuning, and then like can squeeze out a little more better performance. So here you can see like when you use kernel equal to linear, like a linear classifier, and then like you get like 96. Whereas when you use different hyperparameter, you can able to get 98 for as a mean accuracy. So obviously you can squeeze out a little more additional performance when you use a grid search strategy. And like there is another strategy called the random search. Intuitively, like you can think about it like, okay, like rather than mentioning the numbers here, you can mention like, okay, like I want to hyper parameter search between 1 to 1000, and then the number of runs I can use is like 10 runs I can use between 1 to 1000, and it randomly picks up a number called like let's take in the first run it takes 50, second run it takes 250, third run it takes like 700, and then like it picks up a random thing, and it might even perform good. So that is called as random grid search. This is a grid search with like you have to mention the values. However, you can intuitively think like you can even implement a random search here also with this code, but there is another inbuilt function called random search. So to quickly summarize whatever we have seen till now is we have seen like a different types of classification problem that can be implemented using scikit-learn. And then like we have seen regression problems, that is linear regression, how it is separating, how it is capturing the trend in a linear line, and then like in polynomial with different order to capture the trend even better. And then we have seen standardized scalar and then min-max scalar, so that the scale of the input values is always within the same range, so that the model converges faster, and then like the calculations becomes even easier for the model to do in the backend. And if the model if your input distribution follows a random distribution, normal or a Gaussian distribution, go with standard scalar. If not, go with the min-max scalar. And this is just not it's not always a perfect way to judge it. In those cases, you can just use both and then see like for which you get a better score. And we have seen a cross-validation approaches where we have seen k-fold. So sometimes when you have a very imbalanced data set or very sparse data set with sparse output class, you might mislead with a different, like a biased training and bias testing data set. So in those kind of cases, we can use a stratified k-fold split, where you can pick up the better pick up the data set from each and every buckets of classes, so that it is a better representative of all the data set. So you can even think like from it will be intuitively think like, okay, let's take even in most of the problems we will have some imbalanced data set, so stratified will be very much essential. So similarly, even in most of the thing, like, okay, like even if you take politics, like I'm not that good at politics, but you can see like from each and every province you have some number of seats, so based upon some population, so that it is a better representative of the Canadian population. So rather than where the state might be bigger in space but very less number of population, So there would be lesser number of seats for the cabinet. So I'm not that good at what's happening in politics, but you can just think about it in a way like how we can better represent the whole population. So that's where like Stratified comes into play. And then we have hyperparameter search, where you can just mention, though you don't understand support vector classifier, these are like, I just wrote it because anyhow on Monday you will be having this in the class. I just wrote it so that in your Kaggle problem or like the upcoming project, this would be an essential reference material for you to have it. So that is the reason I have used it. So just think it from a way like in a dictionary, you can pass it as a list of values. So as a with all different combinations, it will try to run with, okay, when C equal to 1, and then like different gamma values with different RBF and kernel and with different values. So let's take, you have it essentially runs on all different combinations, and it also classifies the report, and then it gets the better hyperparameter value. So officially, the tutorial is done. Like we have covered all the essential topics. However, I have just linked some additional future materials. So though they are not covered in the class, I just thought like this would be essential for you to have a good idea like how it works. So in the support vector classifier, you can see like it's trying to have a same decision line similar to logistic regression. However, it tries to increase the margin so that have a better representative. And like I'm not going into the code, and then I'm not going into the intuition. Just see the decision boundary, and then like once the class is done, you can always revisit this material for even a better understanding. And the kernel is nothing but a nonlinear decision boundary that can be used. And then like, so we after some class you will be seeing decision tree and see like how it works, how different the decision boundary is. So it's like kind of if else condition. If the age is lesser than this, and then like if the estimated salary is lesser than this, so it falls under here. And it may basically the intuition is that. So you can always keep this as a reference material. Like once after the class, once you are covered, once the topic has been covered in the class, you can always revisit this material so that it will be better representative of all things that you can use that in your class. So because if I don't use this, then it won't be a complete sklearn material. So I have linked this kind of additional materials or future reference material. You can use this to understand what's happening in the class, or like what's happening in the background for a better understanding. Okay. So do you guys, anybody has any doubt or like any like machine learning, like some intuition doubts, or like why it's performing like this, or like why the boundary is like this, or like when on scenario questions, or like anything you have, you can always okay, will it be sensible to use a piece of the data set rather than whole hyperparameter tuning? There would be a trade-off again. Like if you just let's take, you have 1 million data set, and then like you're just gonna take like 10,000 data set. The hyperparameter tuning will be faster, but you can't be always sure like this 1,000 data set, this 10,000 data set will be 100% better representative of the 1 million data set. So even there you have a loss when you downscale to a data set and hypertune. And there would be again another thing. Let's take for 1 million data set you have. Let's take in the scenario like you found the best hyperparameter in the 10K data set, and you know like it's performing good, and then like it works really well. But if you're going to train with 1 million data set, it's not always sure like whatever the parameter that you found for 10K will be the same for 1 million data set. So it's good to, whatever your data set you have, you can stick with that rather than like downsampling and then like doing a hyperparameter search. However, a good strategy that you can try is like for 1 million data set, for each and every run, or like decoding, or like finding the bugs, and then like checking whether the model runs good. For 1 million data set, it will be really hard, and then high computing is needed. So in that case, you can just take a 10,000 example and then like try to build the pipeline and then try to build the code and make sure like everything runs. And then you can replace that with a 1 million data set and then hyper tune it. So this would be a better pipeline that you can follow in your projects. Hope that answer your question, Atul. Like, anybody would like to ask questions? Thank you, Behanuj. Thank you, Atul. So I officially will stop the recording here. Thank you, guys. Thank you for being an active participant. It's good to have you.